I ended up going on a blind date with my own company's CEO. Since the CEO rarely came to the office, I didn't recognize him. Little did I know, this mistaken encounter would lead to so many socially mortifying moments for me afterward. As the end of the year approached, the calls from home urging me to get married kept ringing non-stop. I reluctantly picked up the phone, trying to greet this battle with the most pleasing tone I could muster. "Mom, why are you calling your precious daughter?" Mom didn't seem convinced. When are you going to bring a boyfriend home? You're already 29. Then Mom switched into nagging mode. You've been single for 29 years. In our day, kids would already be running errands by now. Look at Xiao Wang next door, he's married with kids, a happy family of 3. Now look at you. Every time at moments like this, I would put my phone far away. When the voice on the other end suddenly went silent, I knew that Mom saying she was tired didn't mean the conversation was over. I picked up the phone and said nonchalantly, "Got it, Mom. This year, I'm definitely going to bring home a handsome, rich CEO." After saying that, I quickly hung up and plopped down on the sofa. Looking up at the ceiling, I sighed helplessly, God. Just stab me with a sword already, my feudal mom and my henpecked dad are such a headache. I looked down at the half-packed suitcase on the floor, a sudden wave of inexplicable irritation rising in me. I muttered to myself, serving the boss at work, and then getting pressured to marry at home, there's really no way to live like this. I picked up my phone, flipped through my contacts, and finally called my best friend Ivy. "Ivy, are you free right now?" As soon as Ivy heard my voice in that question, she immediately knew I must need something and bluntly said, "Nope, Missy, my dad sent me on a business trip abroad. The New Year's coming up, and poor me can't even go home." Hearing that, I couldn't help but complain. "I was hoping to hang out and relax with you, but looks like that's not happening." Ivy rolled her eyes at me through the phone screen. "Spit it out. What's the order? Did your mom start nagging you about marriage again?" I unloaded all my frustrations about my mom's marriage pressure on her. After listening, Ivy pondered for a moment. "I have an idea. You could go on some blind dates. If you meet someone decent, just agree for now. Then, when the holidays come, find an excuse to break up." I replied in disbelief, "You're such a heartless woman, how do you even come up with this stuff?" Ivy's disdain practically oozed through the phone. "You're just as old-fashioned as your mom. Big sis, what era do you think this is?" After a pause, she spoke again. "I can help you post your information on some websites. You can go to a few interviews and see how it goes. Maybe you'll find someone suitable." Hearing Ivy say that, I actually felt a faint stir in my heart. Although it sounded a bit ridiculous, thinking about the endless pressure from my family to get married, I figured it was worth a shot. I hesitated for a moment but eventually agreed. As soon as Ivy heard my answer, she immediately exclaimed excitedly, "Great. Leave it to me. Don't worry, I'll find you a tall, handsome guy who can also handle your parents, the perfect boyfriend." The following days were hectic beyond belief. As a project director, I not only had to manage my daily tasks but also juggle various annual reports. These tedious matters gave me a serious headache. However, on the very last night before the holiday, while I was attending the company's annual party, I received a call from my best friend. Ivy excitedly said, "I've shortlisted someone. The profile says he has no parents, only a grandfather. Does that work?" After listening carefully to Ivy's introduction, I thought this candidate was quite suitable. Ivy then arranged the meeting. "I'm heading home soon, so it has to be quick." Ivy seemed to have expected this. "You're always so impatient. The person can't run away. It's set tonight at 9 at Little Town Story Cafe. The signal is a magazine left on the table. Bring a magazine too, so it's easier to identify each other." I smiled knowingly. "You really get me." After hanging up, I quietly slipped out of the venue. Outside, I hailed a taxi and headed straight to the place she mentioned. Watching the heavy snowflakes outside the window, I sat in the taxi with palms already sweaty. After getting out, I almost ran toward the cafe, though a few snowflakes still landed on my shoulder, beginning to melt. As I pushed open the glass door, a wave of warmth mixed with a faint aroma of coffee greeted me. I glanced at the watch on my wrist, 8:50, 10 minutes to go. I scanned the surroundings, searching for the person with a magazine by their side. At that moment, a figure sitting in the corner caught my attention. He wore a dark coat, his hair slightly tousled, but his eyes revealed a resolute and profound depth. Indeed, there was a magazine resting beside him. I took a deep breath, mustering the courage to approach him. After sitting down, I pretended to calmly flip through the magazine in my hands, though my heart was already pounding wildly. "Hello, I'm Sophia," I broke the silence first, my voice carrying a barely noticeable tremor. He looked up and smiled softly, a smile that seemed to instantly melt the ice within one's heart. "Hello, I'm Victor." His voice was low and magnetic, naturally stirring a fondness within me. Gazing at his handsome face, a ripple of emotion stirred deep inside. I cut straight to the point. My parents are pressuring me to get married, and I need a boyfriend to bring home for the new year. So, what do you think? Is that okay? I paused then, watching his expression closely. But there was no change, he just quietly looked at me. Then I added, "Would you be willing to come home with me for the new year this year?" He looked clearly taken aback, not expecting me to say that. He spoke calmly and deliberately, "Sophia, let me interrupt, we don't really know each other yet. It's not common for a girl to ask someone to go home with her right off the bat." Hearing that, I immediately felt embarrassed. "Sorry, I was just too eager." Just as I was about to turn and leave my seat, he looked at me and said, "I agree." I thought I must have misheard. Looking at him, I asked, "Victor, what did you just say?" Victor smiled slightly and slowly spoke to me word by word, "I say, I agree." I couldn't help but feel a surge of joy and sat down, opening my mouth. "I suppose Ivy has already told you about my situation." Then I proceeded to introduce myself. "I currently work at a private company, with an annual salary of 300,000 yuan, and I am a project director." Victor remained silent, as if deep in thought. I hurriedly explained, "If you don't feel assured, I can give you money and even leave my ID card as collateral." Victor's lips curved into a slight smile. "Sophia, you're joking. I'm not here to sell myself, so no need for money. Just give me your ID card." I immediately understood. "Victor, it's a pleasure to meet you. I hope we can cooperate well and get through this challenging time smoothly." I raised my coffee cup to him as a gesture. He gently tapped his cup against mine, his eyes flickering with an inexplicable light. "Pleasant cooperation, Sophia." After exchanging contact information, I turned and walked out of the cafe, taking a deep breath of the crisp air, feeling unusually refreshed. Although this blind date was initially to deal with family pressure to marry, meeting Victor was an unexpected gain. I had just picked up my phone to thank my best friend, not expecting that we were truly in sync. Right then, Ivy's call came through. I was in a cheerful mood, ready to share with her. Before I could even speak, Ivy's voice, furious to the point of explosion, came through the phone. "Sophia, I called you at 7 to tell you to meet a gentleman at the Little Town Story Cafe at 9, the one with magazines on his table." Then she rattled off a string of words. "Vict waited from 9 until you showed up at 10:30. I'm asking you, where were you? Sophia, are you not in a hurry again? Work can keep you safe from the pressure to get married, huh? Fine, I won't ask any more." Ivy's interrogation left me a bit puzzled. "That's not right. I already met him, and he agreed. We finished talking, and I'm on my way home now." Hearing my answer, Ivy was stunned. "You said you already met him? Then why did you call me saying you didn't see him?" I carefully recalled what Ivy had just said in my mind. "Wait, what did you say that guy's name was again?" Ivy didn't quite understand what I said at first. "Called Vict, what's up?" I helplessly rubbed my forehead. "That's exactly the point. the guy I met today is called Victor. And it just so happens there was a magazine on his table too. Ivy half-jokingly said, I really have to hand it to you, how can you mix that up? I embarrassedly replied, it must have been too noisy at the venue, I must have misheard the name. Ivy's irritation instantly faded, since you've already talked things over with him, tell me, what's he like? I think he's pretty good-looking. How should I put it? Under Ivy's questioning, I realized I knew nothing about Victor. Victor, standing by the floor-to-ceiling window in the cafe, watching my every move, let out a slight sneer, kind of cute, actually. He called his secretary, investigate someone named Sophia, 29 years old, working as a project director at a private company. Soon, the secretary sent Sophia's information to Victor's email. Victor glanced at it quickly, thinking to himself, this is pretty straightforward. I had already arrived home, finished packing my half-packed suitcase, and started my vacation life. The first ray of morning sunlight slipped through the curtains, and at that moment, the phone kept ringing incessantly. I slowly stretched out my hand from the warm bed and fumbled to answer the call. Hello, who is this? My voice still carried a bit of sleepiness. From the other end came a clear male voice, it's me. For a moment, I was dazed, my brain not fully awake yet, and a bit grumpy from just waking up. Impatiently, I asked, you? Who are you? Victor on the other end seemed a little embarrassed by my question, I'm Victor. I'm downstairs at your building. We'll leave for your place in 20 minutes. The moment I heard that, I was instantly jolted awake from my drowsy haze. Hey, when did I ever say I was coming home today? Before I could finish, the call on the other end was already cut off, leaving only a busy signal. Grumbling to myself, I got up and hurriedly washed up, then rushed downstairs as fast as I could. Looking around, I didn't see Victor anywhere. Just as I was about to call him, a luxurious Maybach slowly pulled up. The window rolled down, revealing Victor's handsome face. I quickened my pace toward the car, a flood of questions rushing through my mind. What's going on here? He caught the look of confusion on my face and smiled faintly, it's rented. I opened the door and got in. Just as I settled in, I heard him say to the driver, Simon, we can go now. Hearing that, I couldn't help but gasp inwardly, a rental car with a driver? How much must this be costing? My heart struggled for a long time, but in the end, I decided to make a big sacrifice. How much are the car rental and driver fees? I'll pay you. I can't let you act with me and still lose money. As I said this, my heart was bleeding, as if I could see the hard-earned savings slipping away from me. Victor nodded in agreement and then calmly said, 100,000. Hearing that number, my molars nearly shattered from the shock. What? 100,000? You really have guts. However, complaints aside, I obediently opened Alipay. With a crisp notification, Alipay received 100,000 yuan, my heart sank along with it. Throughout the journey, we both remained silent, each lost in our own thoughts. Soon, the car stopped in front of my villa. My parents had been waiting for quite some time. Although my family wasn't wealthy, we lived a modest, comfortable life. My parents ran a small business, and in our small county town, they were doing quite well. After graduating, I was determined to make a name for myself in a big city. When a Maybach pulled up in front of them, they instinctively stepped aside. Their eyes showed surprise and confusion. Sitting in the car, I watched their reactions and couldn't help but chuckle. Meanwhile, Victor quietly observed me from the side, his gaze seeming to carry a hint of affection. Then, I stepped out of the car. Seeing me get out, my parents quickly pulled me aside. Sophia, you didn't rent a car, did you? Tell me, where's your boyfriend? Just as I was about to answer, Simon opened the rear door, and Victor stepped out of the car. My parents, seeing this, couldn't immediately tell which one was my boyfriend. I hurried over, grabbed Victor's sleeve, and took the initiative to introduce him to my parents. Dad, Mom, this is my boyfriend, and that's his driver, Simon. Victor listened to my introduction and smiled as he greeted my parents, uncle, auntie. Hello, I am Sophia's boyfriend, Victor. Upon hearing this, my parents' faces lit up with satisfied smiles, their eyes filled with admiration as they looked at Victor. Come in quickly, the food is about to get cold, my mother warmly invited. Our group entered the villa, where the dining table was already laden with a sumptuous spread. Victor conducted himself with great poise at the table, politely conversing with my parents and occasionally serving them dishes. After the meal, Victor took the initiative to help clear the dishes, but my parents quickly declined, urging him to rest in the living room. Watching him busy in the kitchen, my heart skipped a beat. That handsome silhouette, every gesture exuded an extraordinary charm. Once everything was tidied up, we sat in the living room chatting. Victor spoke with my parents about his work and family. My parents passed away early, I only have a grandfather now, and I run a financial investment company. Sophia, you really found yourself a good boyfriend, Mom said with a smile from the side. Listening to Victor's words, I couldn't help but laugh. What a storyteller. Renting a Maybach and you're already out of breath. Time flew by quickly, and before I knew it, it was New Year's Eve. Every household was busy putting up spring couplets, immersed in the joy of the festival. The night of the New Year's Eve was also a night of reunion, with every home brightly lit. Mom had carefully prepared a lavish New Year's Eve dinner. After the meal, we sat on the sofa waiting for the Spring Festival Gala to start. I sat cross-legged on the sofa, phone in hand, the screen constantly flashing with blessing messages from colleagues. At that moment, Ivy was sharing amusing stories from abroad with me, and I was telling her the simple yet heartwarming tales I encountered in the small town. Every now and then, I would glance at my phone and couldn't help but laugh out loud. However, Mom couldn't stand it any longer. She patted my shoulder with a slightly reproachful tone. Oh dear Sophia, why don't you go chat with Victor? He came all this way, and you just leave him standing there, that's so rude. I glanced up at Victor sitting not far away and unconsciously edged a little closer to him. At that moment, my leg lightly brushed against his knee. For a split second, the subtle contact left us both stunned. A faint, almost imperceptible tension hung in the air. To ease the awkwardness, I casually resumed playing on my phone. Before long, my phone buzzed with a message from Victor. I looked up at him, hesitated for a moment, then finally opened his message, "Come out with me for a bit." My heart filled with questions, but I quickly slipped on my shoes and followed him out the door. He pulled up in that Maybach right in front of me. "Please get in," he said politely, stepping over to open the passenger door for me. "Where are you taking me?" I asked, eyes wary. "Don't worry, I'm not selling you off," he said with a relaxed smile. He pushed me into the car and casually closed the door behind me. "Fasten your seatbelt," he said as he leaned in. At that moment, I could clearly feel his closeness. His warm breath gently brushed against my neck, making me shiver slightly. I suddenly looked up and unexpectedly met his gaze. At that very moment, his lips lightly touched my forehead, like a gentle current of electricity that instantly spread through my entire body. My eyes widened instantly, my cheeks blossomed like peach flowers, and my fingers unconsciously clenched, nails digging deep into my palm, yet I felt no pain at all. Time seemed to freeze, leaving only the sound of our heartbeats and breaths echoing in the quiet night. Victor appeared to realize his lapse, quickly straightening up and sitting back in the driver's seat, a flicker of embarrassment and regret crossing his face. "I'm sorry, Sophia, I didn't mean to." His voice was low and slightly hoarse, carrying a faint, barely noticeable tremor. I was stunned for a moment before slowly coming back to myself, lowering my head, too shy to meet his eyes, feeling the warmth on my cheeks linger for a long time. It's nothing," I stammered in response, my voice as soft as a whisper. The car fell into a brief silence, with only our breathing echoing in our ears. I stole a glance at Victor, who was focused on driving, his expression serious and solemn, as if nothing had just happened. My heart was filled with a mix of shyness and panic, yet also a strange sweetness. Before long, he took me to an unknown riverside, where a bright full moon hung over the water. We stood side by the bridge. As the New Year's bells rang out, dazzling fireworks blossomed in the night sky. "Sophia, Happy New Year." Victor's voice was gentle, tinged with a hint of intimacy. "Victor, Happy New Year," I replied softly. Under the moonlight, his figure looked especially tall and slender. Step by step, he moved closer to me, each step seeming to tread on the very tip of my heart. Before I could gather my thoughts, he had already pulled me into a tight embrace. He lowered his head and, with an irresistible tenderness, kissed my lips. In that moment, the world seemed to stand still, leaving only the echo of our heartbeats. I broke free from his embrace and turned to leave, but he grabbed me back, causing me to fall into his arms. He cupped the back of my head with one hand, tilted my head, and kissed me, whispering softly, "Please don't go." I couldn't help but nod. The hotel room was filled with a special atmosphere that made my heart race. He wrapped his arms around my waist, buried his face in my neck, and gently nibbled at my skin, patiently coaxing me. My heart pounded wildly. Just as I was about to say something, he kissed me, cupping my cheeks and slowly prying my lips apart. My mind went blank, and I obediently closed my eyes. We moved from the living room all the way to the bedroom. We crashed onto the bed, and instantly his kisses rained down like raindrops. He slowly reached out, holding the back of my head as our breaths intertwined. I felt like I was breathing through him, and suddenly my whole body began to burn with heat. Victor stopped kissing at that moment, breathing heavily as he said, "Sophia, can we not be apart when we go back?" A wave of uncertainty washed over me, and I weakly replied, "Let's talk about it later." Then one possessive kiss after another fell upon me. He held my hands and gradually tightened his grip, as if trying to meld me into his body. A sleepless night followed. Just as I was about to fall asleep, the phone beside me rang at an inconvenient time. I endured the aching soreness throughout my body and fumbled for the phone. Before I could see who it was, he snatched it from me, hung up, and powered it off in one swift motion. The arm draped around my waist tightened closer to him. "Sleep a little longer," he murmured. I had no strength to argue, and before long, I succumbed to the drowsiness and fell asleep. When I woke up again, the sky was already growing dark. I wanted to get up to wash up, but as soon as I stood, the weakness in my legs made me fall beside the bed. He was still washing up, but hearing the noise I made, he quickly came over to me, wearing only a bathrobe with the collar wide open. He directly scooped me up in a princess carry and laid me back on the bed. Seeing his 8-pack abs, my cheeks instantly flushed red. His gentle words made me even more embarrassed. "It's all my fault for making you suffer. Lie down and rest a bit more." I instinctively curled up under the blanket, only slowly peeking out after hearing his footsteps fade away. Suddenly, I remembered my phone seemed to have rung this morning. Hastily, I got up to look for it. He turned his head, watching me anxiously searching, and asked, "What are you looking for?" I replied impatiently, "My phone. I think it rang this morning." He took the phone from the bedside and handed it to me. I quickly unlocked it and saw a string of missed calls longer than life itself. In that moment, I felt utterly drained of all my energy and spirit. He, unfazed, asked, "What's wrong?" I snapped at him, "It's all your fault. Look, my parents have been going crazy looking for me. Just think about how you're going to explain this later." He replied matter-of-factly, "How else am I supposed to explain it? Just tell the truth. At worst, I'll marry you." Hearing this, I widened my eyes in disbelief. "You want to marry? I'm the one who doesn't want to. I don't need you to take responsibility. This was a mutual thing from the start." With that, I got up and started washing up. Looking at myself in the mirror, covered in marks, I shot him a resentful glance. I couldn't help but feel grateful that last night I had insisted he not leave marks on my neck. We returned home together. After my parents confirmed I was safe and sound, they first grabbed me excitedly, looking me over from every angle. Then, anger surged up in their hearts. "Sophia, where have you been all day and night? How many calls did we make? You didn't answer a single one. Are you saying there's no longer a place for me as your dad in your heart?" Victor saw me being questioned and was about to speak up to explain, but I stopped him. Of course, I knew what he was going to say. I snuggled up to my parents coquettishly and spoke softly, "Mom, Dad, you're overthinking it. Yesterday, I was just with Victor handling some urgent company matters." Victor caught on immediately and followed my lead, saying, "Yes, Uncle and Aunt, Sophia and I were busy together all night and only rested this morning. The phone probably died, that's why she didn't answer." I shot him a glance, seriously suspecting there was more to his words. Hearing this, Dad's frown eased slightly. Mom, looking full of concern, took my hand gently and patted it, saying, "Oh, my precious daughter, no matter how busy you are, you have to call us to let us know you're safe. Your dad stayed up all night waiting for your news." Seeing this, Victor quickly added, "Uncle, Auntie, it was my oversight. From now on, I will definitely take good care of Sophia and not let you two worry." I nestled into my mother's arms, softly comforting, "Mom, Dad, I know I was wrong. I will be more careful from now on." Since my intimate encounter with Victor, the dynamic between us had subtly shifted. Time flew by, and before I knew it, the holiday was coming to an end. On the way back, I tried to edge closer to the door, but Victor kept inching his body toward me. Just as he was right next to me, he whispered softly in my ear, "Do you want to try being with me?" His voice was husky, laced with a teasing allure. I remained silent, giving him no clear answer until we got off the car. Back at home, I pondered over our relationship for a long time and finally decided to end it. I blocked all his contacts and resumed my grueling daily grind. A few days later, Victor noticed that I hadn't sent him any messages. He decided to test my attitude by sending me texts, but without exception, each message he sent was marked with a red exclamation point. Suppressing his anger, he called Simon. "Simon, make arrangements. I'm going to inspect the finance company the day after tomorrow." Upon receiving the call from his boss, Simon immediately understood the situation. Before long, the day of the inspection arrived. The finance company had long been notified, and early in the morning, all the management staff were waiting at the entrance. Simon parked his Bentley in front of the company. As Simon got out of the car, a thought struck me, could it really be such a coincidence? Simon quickly ran to the rear right door and opened it. Stepping out was none other than our company's president, Victor. In my heart, I silently screamed, "Oh my God, Victor is the president of our company? Is he going to confront me? Should I resign proactively?" However, as Victor passed by me, he didn't glance my way once. It seemed he hadn't even noticed me. The anxiety that had hung over me slowly began to ease. Back in the office, I continued handling the work at hand. After a while, Simon pushed open the office door. I saw the puzzled look on Simon's face. Seeing my confusion, Simon spoke directly, "Sophia, the CEO wants you to go to his office." The anxiety I had been holding on to finally died down. "Okay, Simon, I'll go in a bit." Simon remained standing still. "The CEO said he wants me to personally take you there." Gritting my teeth, I followed Simon up to the 13th floor. Simon knocked on the CEO's office door, and Victor's voice came from inside, "Come in." Simon gestured for me to enter. I took a deep breath at the door, as if preparing to march into battle, and stepped into the office. I walked into the office and looked at Victor sitting on the sofa. I spoke first, "Victor." Victor looked at me and extended his hand, signaling me to sit down. I sat on the sofa opposite Victor. Victor picked up the teacup in his hand, took a gentle sip, and asked, "How have you been lately?" My toes were so awkwardly curled I could have dug out a 3-bedroom apartment, but I smiled and replied, "Victor, I've been doing pretty well lately." Victor sent a message to Simon, "Bring the stuff inside." Simon carried an assortment of small cakes and various flavored milk teas, arranging them all over the table. Victor looked at me, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. I remember you like sweets. See if you like these. I was momentarily taken aback. I hadn't expected him to be so thoughtful. I answered softly, thank you, I like all of these. Victor smiled slightly and gestured for me to try some. I had just picked up a piece of strawberry cake and taken a bite when a sudden wave of nausea hit my stomach. I rushed to the trash can and retched several times. Victor quickly stood up, concern in his voice. Sophia, are you okay? As he spoke, he grabbed his phone to contact his family doctor. I quickly waved my hand to indicate there was no need to go to such trouble. Victor helped me sit on the sofa. He handed me a cup of tea, and I took a few sips before slowly starting to feel better. At that moment, the family doctor had already arrived and knocked on the office door. Victor's anxious voice called out, "Come in." The doctor asked Victor about the symptoms, and Victor explained that I was feeling unwell. I responded to the doctor, "Lately, I've been feeling overwhelmed at work, easily sleepy, and just now I had some dry heaving." The doctor thought for a moment and said, "Sophia, may I take your pulse?" I considered it and nodded in agreement. The doctor reached out and placed his hand on my wrist. After a moment, he withdrew his hand, stood up, and said, "Congratulations, Sophia. You are already 5 weeks pregnant." The news hit me like a thunderbolt, and Victor's smile stretched almost to his ears. After seeing off the family doctor, Victor came over to me and asked if I was feeling any discomfort. I shook my head to indicate no. Sitting on the sofa, I still couldn't accept the reality and immediately decided to go to the hospital for a checkup. I stood up and wanted to ask Victor for leave. Victor, as if understanding my thoughts, said, "I'll go with you." He quickly arranged for Simon to prepare the car to accompany me to the hospital. Along the way, he held my hand tightly, his eyes full of tenderness and anticipation. At the hospital, after a series of tests, it was confirmed that I was indeed pregnant. Victor looked excitedly at the test results beside me and kissed me on the cheek with excitement. "Sophia, I love you." I didn't want to respond and turned to walk toward the hospital entrance. Victor hurried to catch up and tried to support me, but I shrugged him off, indicating I didn't need it. Victor said with a pleading face, "Honey, let's go home. I'll ask for leave from the company for you." Upon hearing this, I immediately stopped him. "Victor, we've already broken up. You have no right to interfere in my life. Even if there's a child, it's only my child and has nothing to do with you." Victor said nothing but opened the car door. "Sophia, I'll take you home." Just as I was about to get out, I said to Victor, "I'll take a month's leave first, please approve it." Victor immediately replied, "Sophia, why be so polite with me? What's mine is yours." During that month, day after day, Victor came to my home, carefully preparing every meal for me. Although I never expressed it in words, I silently took in every bit of his effort, my heart full of gratitude. Finally, Ivy returned from abroad, and we reunited after a long time at a hot pot restaurant. She had been longing for the hot pot back home, so as soon as she got off the plane, she rushed straight here. While savoring the delicious food, we chatted freely about our lives. Suddenly, Ivy asked curiously, "How are things going between you and Victor now?" I responded calmly, "It's nothing special, but I recently found out I'm pregnant." Ivy's eyes widened in surprise as she asked, "You're pregnant? Is it Victor's? What did he say? Does he not want the child? Wait here, I'll go confront him." With that, she stood up, rolled up her sleeves, ready to go and reason with Victor. I quickly stopped her and explained, "No, it's not like that. I just haven't decided what to do yet. He wants the child and even said he wants to marry me." Hearing this, Ivy slowly sat back down and said earnestly, "I'm not trying to criticize, but are you out of your mind? Victor is rich, handsome, and willing to take responsibility. What more could you possibly want?" I smiled helplessly and replied, "I do have feelings for him, but I'm just not ready to step into marriage yet. Ivy looked at me with a speechless expression and teased, "You have feelings for him too, you even have a child together, and now you're telling me you still haven't made up your mind? You're such a jerk." After dinner, I returned home and saw Victor still sitting there waiting for me. I slowly walked over to him, sat down beside him, and softly asked, "Victor, are you willing to marry me?" Hearing my words, Victor's face showed disbelief. He looked at me tenderly and said, "Sophia, I've been willing to marry you for a long time." Then, he suddenly stood up and rushed toward the door. Before leaving, he said to me, "Sophia, wait for me." His actions left me completely confused. I thought to myself, could he be afraid and running away? Whatever, let him go. Right now, all I want is to rest well. When I woke up in the morning, the first thing I saw was Victor sitting beside my bed, staring at me without blinking. He handed me a stack of property deeds and a stack of equity transfer documents. I looked at him in surprise, unable to grasp his meaning for a moment. Seeing this, Victor began to explain, "Sophia, I stayed up all night yesterday organizing the assets under my name, and now I'm giving them all to you. I want to marry you and spend the rest of my life with you." I told him not to rush and that we should have breakfast first. After we finished eating, I sat on the sofa watching TV. At that moment, Victor suddenly dropped to one knee, holding a ring he must have prepared earlier, and slowly said, "Sophia, will you marry me? I can give you everything I have, including myself." I looked into his sincere eyes, nodded, and whispered, "I do." After the successful proposal, he kept insisting that we go get our marriage certificate together. Victor believed that only with the certificate could we truly be husband and wife. His persistence wore on my patience a bit, so that afternoon, I went with him to get our marriage certificate. That evening, he took me to our bridal suite and patiently gave me a tour. When we reached the master bedroom, surrounded by vibrant red decorations, I truly realized that I was about to spend the rest of my life with the man before me. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, and Victor wrapped his arms around my waist from behind, whispering in my ear, "I had this prepared overnight, I wonder if you like it." As he spoke, fireworks exploded outside the window, pulling my thoughts back to the warm scenes of that New Year's Day. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, over 8 months had passed, I was about to give birth. That day, I was leisurely strolling in the garden. Suddenly, my water broke without any warning, and intense contractions hit me instantly. I hurriedly called out to Victor, urging him to take me to the hospital. "Victor, I think I'm going into labor." Victor nervously sped all the way, and before long, we arrived at the hospital. The doctor quickly administered an epidural, which eased my pain just a little. I was laboring hard in the delivery room while Victor anxiously waited outside. Soon, my parents and Victor's grandfather also arrived at the hospital. At that moment, a nurse came out holding a baby and called, "Family of Sophia." I rushed forward. Seeing me approach, the nurse smiled and said, "Congratulations, it's a boy." After letting me take a quick look at the child, she carried him back inside. Grandpa happily said, "Wonderful, my granddaughter-in-law has worked hard. I need to think carefully about what gift to give." After waiting for a while, I was pushed out of the delivery room. Giving birth had completely exhausted me, and as soon as I reached the ward, I fell into a deep sleep. When I woke up, I saw Victor looking at me with a face full of concern, his hand gently caressing my cheek. "Sophia, you've been through so much. We won't have any more children after this." I told him I wanted to see the baby, so Victor brought the child over. I looked at this tiny, dark-skinned, wrinkled little infant. Though my eyes showed a hint of distaste, my heart was filled with love. After we were discharged, Victor named the little one Lucas. When Lucas turned 1, we held a grand wedding by the seaside.